Hey guys, what's up? It's Kevin for the win, and we're back for another edition of Diablo 3. Today on the channel, we are going to take a look at the very last set armor for the Barbarian, known as the Legacy of Raekor armor. Now, this is a Furious Charge set armor. Furious Charge is not the greatest of abilities to have on the Barbarian, but it's not the worst. So, 2-piece bonus Furious Charge refunds a charge if it only hits one enemy. 4-piece Furious Charge gains 1,000% increased damage and gets all the ruins. 6-piece bonus. Every use of Furious Charge increases the damage of your next Fury spending attack by 5,500%. So, basically, the way we're going to use this armor is we are going to go the HOTA variation of it, which is Hammer of the Ancient. So what we're going to do is we are going to just use Furious Charge to gain very large amounts of stacks and then basically drop the hammer down on our enemies. So one of the things I have to mention here is we're going to be using not really skull grafts. That's just a placeholder until I can get the ring that I really need for this particular armor set, which is a very better version of a Compass Rose. So we're also going to be using the Little Rogue and the Slandler. 2-piece set says, every time you spend a primary resource, gain 8% increased attack speed, damage, and armor for 5 seconds. This effect stacks up to 5 times. So you can see this armor is going to rely heavily on stacking various buffs to be able to do a lot of damage. So what we're going to end up doing is using Furious Charge and then dropping hammers. In order to help with that, we're going to have Battle Rage, Hammer of the Ancients, Smash as our secondary skill. Threatening Shout, Falter, which is going to help us increase the amount of damage that we dish out. We are also going to use, obviously, Furious Charge. It doesn't matter what ruin you pick because of the 4-piece set bonus. You get all the ruins anyway, so we'll just select that one. Ignore the Pain. Ignorance is bliss because we need to be able to tank a couple of these hits here. We're also going to be using Wrath of the Berserker, Insanity, and we have the Mortrix Brace, I believe, in the cube, so that will help us out. These are the passes I'm using there. So we also have Unforgiving, as you can see here. Nerves of Steel as well. Now for the Kanai's Cube, the Gravel of Judgment, very important to have that. Mortrix Brace, because we want to get all the ruins of Wrath of the Berserker. Band of Might, very important that you have this in the Kanai's Cube. Those were the Paragon that I allotted here. For the purpose of this demonstration, we are going to do a Greater Rift 60, 65, and a 70. Now this is not a speed variant armor, so it's not going to be able to speed through Greater Rifts at very high and fast speeds. This is more of what we would consider in the Diablo 3 community as a push build, where you're just basically pushing your way till you get to the end of the Greater Rift, and usually you will just be able to clear it, but this is not a speed variation. If you're looking for something that's super fast and speedy with the Barbarian, I recommend that you look in our playlist for the Whirlwind Barbarian set, because that will do you way better and goes a lot faster. This is more push variant. So basically what we're going to be doing with this armor is, once we get into a Greater Rift, we are going to be Furious Charging around, setting up stacks. Usually we want to count up to about 10 to 15 stacks if possible, then drop the Hammer of the Ancients. Drop the Hammer of the Ancients primarily on Elite Pack. So what we're really trying to do as we're going through a Greater Rift is basically Elite Pack hunting. So if you can Furious Charge away from the small mobs that are not associated with Elite Packs, and just target your way to Elite Pack, case in point here. Continue to build up that Furious Charge, because you're going to basically be doing Furious Charging all around, scouting for an Elite Pack, and then you're just going to drop a Hammer of the Ancients, which is supercharged thanks to the 6-piece set bonus of Raekor. Also, some people pronounce it Raekor. I believe it's pronounced Raekor, though, so keep that in mind. Another thing that you're going to want to do as you're going through the Greater Rift is make sure, when possible, to keep your Wrath of the Berserker active. If you see that there is a large, densely populated area with a large Elite Pack in it, and you have your Threatening Shout available, definitely make sure to Threatening Shout and then drop the Hammer of Ancients, because you will be doing the maximum amount of damage. For all intents and purposes, you really, for Furious Charge, if you want to get the most out of it, have to basically just Furious Charge the little mobs and don't waste your Hammer of the Ancients on them. Unfortunately, when it comes to Furious Charge, there are not a whole bunch of things you can do to buff the attacks damage that is dealt with Furious Charge. Some people in the comments may be asking why we are not using Vile Ward. Vile Ward gives you 35% increased damage to Fury's Charge if it passes through a certain amount of enemies. That 35% damage increase is not really very significant when it comes to Fury's Charge. Fury's Charge just doesn't do a whole bunch of damage, particularly on the higher greater rifts, to actually be able to kill enemies. And really, we just use Fury's Charge to build the stacks to feel our supercharged Hammer of the Ancients, which is kind of the point of this particular armor set. You could probably sub out Hammer of the Ancients for a different Raekor variation. However, this is the one that's really going to be able to push greater rifts, because you could use pretty much any primary or resource spending attack and probably get a similar effect, but not as effective, because Hammer of the Ancients is good because it is kind of like an AoE effect in that it drops down and destroys a very large radius. Now, case in point here, if you have stacks to spare, you can always drop the hammer. Keep in mind, whenever you are dropping down a Hammer of the Ancients, you are depleting 5 stacks of the Furious Charges that you have built up with Raekor's 6-piece bonus, so keep that in mind. I dropped the hammer there, and you saw it explodes a large area. In a way, you could kind of think of this as sort of playing very similar to the Uliana's armor set with the exploding palms, where you're waiting to get a large area of mobs densely populated, preferably the elite pack, so that you can drop the hammer. Case in point, I'm going to drop the hammer right here, and you see it implodes pretty much everything around me. Now, as you can see, Raekor is not a very fast armor, so it takes a while. We're basically literally pushing our way towards the end. Some people do really like to use this for greater rift pushing in Diablo 3 seasons, because it is good at pushing. It does pretty well. It's significantly tanky because you have to remember, because of the 4-piece bonus where you're getting all the ruins from Furious Charge, you actually, when the rune says that whenever you Furious Charge, you increase your amount of defense. And keep in mind, we also have the Little Rogue and Slander that also is increasing our defenses based on the amount of stacks that we have for that particular weapon set as well. So you have to really micromanage here. Another thing that I should definitely note for this particular set build is that when it comes to keeping an eye on resources, you have to definitely keep an eye and count basically in your head the amount of stacks that you're actually doing. Because if you get a little too crazy with the hammer and you start dropping it a little too much and you're not really saving it for elite packs, you will end up in a very rough spot where your Furious Charge is not going to do really any type of damage for you. And when you drop a Hammer of the Ancients that hasn't been supercharged with a certain amount of stacks, based on the 6-piece bonus, you drop a very weak hammer, which is not going to be able to really take out much outside of a regular mob. Here is a good situation of I had to drop the hammer, but I know I'm counting in my head stack. Usually try to do about 5 stacks into an enemy if there's not a lot. And if you see that you really need to drop the hammer because there is a elite pack there, definitely do that. But definitely with this armor, it's all about scouting, trying to get away with your Furious Charges, ironically, when possible, and just searching for elite packs. Basically, you're elite pack hunting. That's the strategy with this armor. Now, when it comes to the Rift Guard, in case we're here, we're going to just keep charging into this a significant amount. About 8 stacks, maybe 10, you drop the hammer, unless you've been Furious Charging into enemies prior to this, and then you could drop a hammer. Usually, on lower greater rifts, when you're not fully optimized, case in point, this is an armor where I have not augmented with legendary gems, all the pieces here. You pretty much should be able to take care of a Rift Guardian on 60, 65, 70. I would even go as far as saying 75 if you build your stacks properly, and definitely don't waste these stacks. So you can clear things pretty high up, even non-optimized. The one problem with this particular armor set, like I said, is it's very slow, so you're not going to get very high position on the leaderboard. There are things you can do to probably augment this a little bit better. I know somebody in the comments is probably going to mention the set that goes pretty much great with everything, Captain Crimson. Yes, you can run Captain Crimson on here. What I would recommend is you would get rid of the belt, and you would get rid of the pants, and you would put the Captain Crimson belt and the pants on it. However, because you would be using the Captain Crimson's belt and pants, you automatically would then have to use the Ring of Royal Grandeur in your Kanai's Cube. Now, if you do that, then you can't put the Band of Might as your ring in Kanai's Cube, which you need, which means then you have to find a ancient legendary Band of Might ring to put in one of the slots. And keep in mind the R slot, you're going to need the Compass Rose to go along with the Traveler's Pledge. That will probably be a more optimized one, but it will take you a very, very long time to acquire a Ancient Legendary Bandamite ring. That is a ring, when it comes to the Barbarian class, that very, very rarely drops. And I mean rarely drops an Ancient Legendary version. You could go the Reforger route. That will take you a significantly longer amount of time. This is a Greater Rift 65. The last Greater Rift we did was 60, and we cleared it in about 5 minutes, which is pretty decent for this particular armor set, considering that it is a push build and not necessarily a speedy armor set. Same strategy as before. I'm going to be furious charging into the little mobs to build up stacks, searching for elite packs, and when we come across an elite pack, we are going to drop the Hammer of the Ancients. That's going to be supercharged based on the amount of stacks that we've done against all the little enemies, furious charging into them, to drop down a hammer that will implode everything in our vicinity. If you get into trouble where you can't get past little mobs, case in point here, you just drop a Hammer of the Ancients. You should have a lot of stacks anyway built up, and to just clear them out if possible. Always try your best to conserve your Hammer of the Ancients for when you have a large area of mobs in front of you where you can clear them all out. Don't waste the Hammer of the Ancients on one enemy, unless it's an elite pack, case in point there. Things that you could do to optimize this armor without using, obviously, Captain Crimson is in your helm, I recommend that you use crit hit ratio 6.0%. In your gloves, I would recommend, these free stats are very important. I would say attack speed either 6, 7, or 8%. Crit hit damage 50% would be optimal, as well as also crit hit ratio 6.0%. People will probably ask, well, why? Well, critical hits are kind of important because they do more damage. So anytime you can augment the chances of doing more critical hit and basically more damage to mobs and Rift Guardians and enemies in general, that's a good thing. So that's why you always want to try to get those free particular stats on your gloves, and also you want, if possible, on your necklace. I have actually a really good Traveler's Pledge. I have a Primal Ancient Legendary that I got lucky with, so I was able, obviously with Primal Ancient Legendary, to get the maximum best possible amount of rolls. Now, when it comes to the Little Rogue and Slander, obviously you want to go for the highest attack stats on the weapons as opposed to anything else on them. Anywhere that you can buff Furious Charge and Hammer of the Ancients on your set without giving up something such as cooldown, which is extremely important on this particular armor set, definitely make sure to do that. I would obviously recommend wherever you can get a good cooldown, definitely put it on. Obviously, when it comes to the helm in particular and the gloves, you're more interested really in trying to get your crit hit as best as possible in the critical hit. But for everywhere else, when you can get cooldown, definitely try to go for it. Kind of can forgo area damage. You could actually, if you wanted to, even reduce the amount of resource cost. So you could go resource cost, but I would recommend cooldown. Cooldown really is more important for this set than minimizing the amount of cooldown, because you are going to get back a lot of fury based on the passives that we have taken for our Barbarian. Okay, so here's a case. I'm going to Furious Charge again, drop a Hammer of the Ancient. You saw I imploded a lot of things. The good thing is you can pretty much keep Furious Charging based on our 2-piece set bonus, so even if we just attack it to 1, we're always going to get back that Furious Charge. As far as Ancient Legendary Gems go for this particular armor set, my recommendation is Bane of the Trap, Bane of the Stricken, and with the third slot, you can play around with a couple things. You could use Stoic Alteration, which would give you a bit more tankiness. You could, if you really wanted to, if you were playing the Captain Crimson variant, I would recommend a Goak of Swiftness, because it'll give you even more cooldown reduction added to what you already have. So that's definitely something you could do. Alternatively, you could use actually Bane of the Powerful all the way up to about Greater Rift 80, 85, and it'll do you kind of a decent amount. Since we are elite pack hunting, Bane of the Powerful tends to get a bit more mileage out of it than it normally would on higher Greater Rifts, because of the fact that we're just really trying to go for elite packs and trying to ignore the little mob. Here's a case that we're going to do Wrath of the Berserker because we want to get some buffs, and then just Fierce Charge a lot of to drop that hammer, see automatically is going to implode. So this is one of the more unique sets for the Barbarian. If you want faster, obviously there's Whirlwind Barbarian, which is available on a playlist, and that's really, very good. I will mention that somebody in the comments actually gave me a suggestion as to why I wasn't running Captain Crimson on the Barbarian, which was interesting because they were watching an older version of the Whirlwind Barbarian build that we did from about 4 months back. Honestly, when it came to that, it's just I was a matter of trying to roll the Captain Crimson pieces that I wanted, because I always try to get the most beneficial version of it, which is like Ancient Legendary, and sometimes if I can get Primal. I haven't gotten Primal yet, but I did get some Ancient Legendary belt and a pants. So with Whirlwind Barbarian, there will be a new variation of that was recommended in the comments that we will be showing off in probably Season 23, because we're only a couple weeks away at this point. I want to see if there's any additional changes. That was a 4-minute and 40-second clear time on Greater Rift 65, which is about Torment 14 difficulty. Here we are going to do a Greater Rift 70. When it comes to Greater Rift 70s, you are going to have to be a lot more careful with Raekor, because as you're going higher up in the Greater Rifts, and you're not necessarily fully optimized. By optimized, I mean augmenting legendary gems into ancient legendary pieces that you have accumulated on your set build. You are going to be a bit more squishy in the sense that you can't take hits as well. And on top of that, another thing that you're going to be noticing as you're higher up in the Greater Run, which is why I think really Raekor kind of loses a lot of favor compared to like Whirlwind Barbarian or the Armor of the 90 Savages, which is the Frenzy Barbarian build, or even to a greater extent the other Hammer of the Ancients variant, which is the Immortal Kings variation, because there's the Immortal Kings set build. It loses favor because it is not able to deal out large amounts of damage to even deal with some of the lower level enemies that you do, in fact, encounter on higher Greater Rifts. So that's why it starts to lose favor. There are still, obviously, ways around it. A Stoic Alteration will give you a bit more tankiness so that you're able to just kind of try to ignore some of the lower level mobs. And that will kind of help you to a certain extent. Honestly, when it comes to Hammer of the Ancient builds, I personally would recommend going with the Immortal Kings variation, because Immortal Kings, you don't have to do as much work. You're not waiting and relying on your lightning windows for your conventional elements, because really that's when you want to take advantage of dropping hammers when preferable, because that's when you could do the maximum or most optimized amount of damage with this particular armor set. On top of that, you're not trying to keep track of the amount of stacks that you have in your head to dropping. On top of that, you can just drop Hammer of the Ancients without having to worry about having to build up stacks to supercharge your hammer. So in my opinion, I would say the Immortal Kings variation of Hammer of the Ancients is the more viable build for HOTA. However, Raekor is obviously a different variation, which is a more pushy, tanky. I mean, it really is going to come down to a preference of, do you like using Furious Charge a whole bunch of time to push for your Greater Rifts, or do you just want to drop your hammers without having to rely on various different windows and stacks to be able to do the optimal amount of damage possible? You know, if you like slow and steady wins the race, Raekor HOTA is probably for you. If you like to just pound things and smash things in their face super fast and want to drop a hammer, then definitely Immortal King. If you just want super fast, powerful, and meta, obviously Whirlwind Barbarian outclasses all these armors tremendously just based on the amount of damage that you could do, the fastness of it, and the efficiency. The only difference really is when it comes to Whirlwind Barbarian builds is they take a little longer to deal with Rift Guardians on high Greater Rifts, because obviously those Rift Guardians get a lot more tanky, have a lot more HP, and you're going to have to spin around, and you have to be more careful because you could get squashed a little quicker. As opposed to with Raekor, where you could just build those stacks and still drop, and probably if you drop at least 3 hammers, you usually will take out a Rift Guardian, let's say Greater Rift 90 and above, with usually 3 hits. Now, if you really wanted to, you could invest in augmenting your ancient legendary gems, or your ancient legendary pieces with legendary gems. But ideally, you would have to have the full set of everything ancient legendary and augment gems all the way up to roughly, I would say, level 100 is the most optimization to get the most out of this build. And I would say at best, Raekor armor is going to probably cap out at around Greater Rift 130. At that point, it's going to drop off. It's not going to be able to clear the significantly or substantially more significant Greater Rifts because it just doesn't have the tools and the power necessary to be able to do things and still get that clear time and ultimately not get squash. So that's one of the things to definitely look at. Which is why, again, it's like Whirlwind Barbarian outclasses just about every Barbarian build, which is just crazy. That one particular armor is so much better for one class than all the rest of the armor, because there's other classes where you could use various different armors, and they all perform significantly well. But another thing to keep in mind with, obviously, the Legacy of Raekor set is that this is not a team-friendly armor. This is an armor that you're primarily going to use for solo play. Obviously, because you're bouncing around, dropping hammers left and right, and trying to rely on those stacks. You are a lot slower in playstyle to usually what you're going to find people playing online. So there's definitely something to keep in mind. Here, I'm going to have to go Wrath of the Berserker and Furious Charge into him. I'm going to try to build up at least 15 stacks, so you're going to see me Furious Charge a lot. I dodged away because of that tornado there. I'm going to start dropping the hammer. You see it took about 4 hammers there because I'm not fully optimized to be able to kill the Rift Guardian. But I did it, and as you see there, we actually got a Primal Ancient Legendary piece that dropped, which is very rare for us to actually even capture that on video here on the channel. So that's something nice. Hopefully it's something that we can use for this set. As you saw, after all the buffs that we do 3,100k damage, which is very respectable, which can push quite a lot. Gonna probably identify some of these legendaries to see if there's anything useful. Most of the time, these are not. I can actually already tell what weapons are what, just based on the silhouettes. You usually will start to pick up those things when you play a ton of Diablo 3. I've played over 130 hours of Diablo 3 on the Nintendo Switch platform, which is the platform we're playing on, for those of you who are probably wondering why this version looks a little bit different from the PC. Keep in mind that all information that is applied in this video applies to any platform, whether you're playing on the Switch, PS4, Xbox 360, or the PC. All set armors work the same. The only difference is really control stick versus mouse and keyboard. That was actually a pretty decent clear time, 5 minutes and 25 seconds. If we did a Greater Rift 75, probably add about 30 seconds to that, so it'd probably cap out at around 6 minutes and change. I'm going to identify, because I'm actually looking for wherever that Primal Ancient Legendary was. I believe it was on the shoulder, so okay, that's useless. I have that already. We actually even covered that armor last week. It's ironic. All right, so we got a Primal Ancient Legendary Vile Ward, which was something I was talking about earlier. Furious Charge deals 35% increased damage to every enemy hit while charging. This is not necessarily a great thing to run on the Furious Charge build, unfortunately, but it's nice to have a Primal Ancient Legendary version. We could probably maybe play around with that if we use the Captain Crimson variation in a future video, so I'm probably going to hold on to it, despite the fact that it's not really that good of a shoulder piece for the Legacy of Raekor armor set. So let's see, is this the... No, these are pants, okay. No. I do identify these things to see if I get better versions of armor that I already have for the Barbarian. Okay. So, Fire Ward, not so bad that we got that. This is the Legacy of Raekor set. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure to give a like and subscribe to the channel if you aren't already doing so. And I will see you Wednesday for the next Diablo 3 video.